I never thought my life would reset so soon. 1 year. That's all my marriage lasted. 12 months of hope, love, disappointment, and ultimately, pain. When the divorce was finalized, I stood in front of the mirror, staring at a woman I barely recognized. The cracks in my reflection weren't just metaphorical. They were real, etched deep into my skin, my soul. So I decided to rebuild. Yoga, art classes, long, quiet walks. I reconnected with friends, picked up the shattered pieces of my identity, and tried to put myself back together. And then there was the leisure center, my sanctuary. The rhythmic strokes of swimming, the steam of the sauna, the way my body melted into warmth, it became my escape. And that's where I met Luke. Luke was young, fit, and handsome in an effortless way. All sharp jawlines and lean muscles. He wasn't just a lifeguard. He was an observer, a listener. Each time I came to the pool, we'd talk. At first, small talk. How busy the center was, the weather, harmless things. But one day, after a particularly tough session, I found myself telling him everything. About the divorce, about the ache of failure, about how I was trying to put myself back together. He listened, not just with his ears, but with his eyes, his presence. He didn't interrupt, didn't judge. "Sounds like you've been through a lot," he said finally, "but you're here. That counts for something." And that was the moment I realized I had started to look forward to seeing him. The more we talked, the more I found myself coming to the center, not just for the swimming, not just for the sauna, but for him. Something unspoken began to build between us, a charge, an awareness that neither of us acknowledged, but both of us felt. I told myself it was nothing, a crush, a rebound, a distraction, but my body told me otherwise. I craved our conversations, the way his deep voice settled around me, the way he leaned in slightly when I spoke. And then, one afternoon, I stopped fighting it. That day, the center was quiet, nearly empty. Luke smiled when he saw me. "Sauna first?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. "I'll bring you the water," he said, his gaze lingering a second too long. The heat of the sauna wrapped around me as I settled onto the wooden bench, letting the warmth seep into my bones. And then, the door opened. Luke stepped inside, carrying the metal bucket. For a moment, it was just the sound of water sloshing, the soft hiss of steam as he poured it onto the rocks. Then, silence. Heavy, charged. I met his eyes. He was standing so close now. There was no more space between us. Only heat, only breath, only want. It happened before I could think, before I could stop it. 1 second, we were standing there, staring at each other. The next, his hands were on me, pulling me against him, and I was pressing into him like I had been starving for years. The kiss was deep, urgent, his lips hot against mine. The heat of the sauna became nothing compared to the fire raging between us. His fingers traced the bare skin of my arms, my back, setting me ablaze. I gasped against his mouth as he pushed me against the wooden panels, his breath ragged, his hands possessive. There was no hesitation, no fear, just need, and we weren't afraid of being caught. In that moment, the world outside didn't exist, only us, only now, only this. The heat still clung to my skin as I sat there, catching my breath. Luke ran a hand through his damp hair, his eyes dark, unreadable. Neither of us spoke. There was no need. I stood, reached for the towel, and turned to him. A slow smile spread across my lips. I had thrown caution to the wind, and I didn't regret a thing. I told myself it was a one-time thing, a reckless, heat-fueled moment. But the truth was, I couldn't stop thinking about it, about the way his hands gripped me, the way his breath hitched against my skin, the raw hunger in his eyes. I had left the sauna that day, my body still burning, my heart still racing. But as I swam slow laps in the pool afterward, I could feel his eyes on me, watching, waiting, wanting, and I wanted him too. Days passed. I told myself to stay away, to let it die in that sauna. But every time I walked into the leisure center, it was there again. The way our eyes met across the room, the accidental brushes of skin when he walked past me, the low, knowing smirk when no one else was looking. Then one night, as I was getting ready to leave, I felt my phone vibrate in my bag, a text. "Luke, sauna's empty. You coming?" A rush of heat spread through me. I should have said no. I should have walked away. But instead, I typed 3 words. Me, on my way. The sauna door closed behind me with a soft click. Luke was already inside, leaning against the wooden bench, his body damp with sweat, his eyes locked onto mine. No words were needed. Within seconds, I was pressed against him, his hands gripping my waist, pulling me in. The steam made everything hazy, surreal. His lips were at my neck, trailing fire down my skin. His fingers traced every curve, every dip of my body, and I let him take me again. Fast, slow, desperate, unforgiving. The heat of the sauna was nothing compared to the heat of us. And for the second time, I let myself drown in him. After, as we sat in the suffocating warmth, our bodies tangled together, I finally spoke. "Luke, I need this to stay simple," I whispered, my voice still shaky. He turned to me, an unreadable expression in his eyes. "No strings?" he asked. "No expectations?" He smirked. "I can do that." But the way he looked at me told me he wasn't sure if he believed me. Neither was I. I became someone else after that night. By day, I was Sarah, the newly divorced woman, finding herself again. By night, I was something else entirely. It was reckless, meeting him in stolen moments, after hours at the leisure center, in his car, parked just outside town. Once, in the staff locker room, so close to being caught, I had to press my hand against my mouth to stop from crying out. I told myself it was just a game, but I was lying, because the more time I spent with him, the more I craved him, not just his body, but his presence. The way he made me laugh, the way he listened to me when no one else did, and I knew this was never going to stay simple. It happened on a Thursday. I was in town, grabbing coffee when I heard my name. "Sarah." I turned and my stomach dropped. It was Beth, an old friend, someone who knew me back when I was still married. We hugged, made small talk, and then her gaze shifted behind me. My heart stopped. Luke was there, standing by the counter, waiting for his drink, and for just a fraction of a second, he was looking at me, the way he did when we were alone. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but Beth saw it. She didn't say anything, not right away. But as we parted ways, she gave me a knowing look, something between curiosity and suspicion. And suddenly I realized people were starting to notice. I should have ended it that night, but when I saw him later, in the dim light of his apartment, I couldn't let go. I let him pull me in, kiss me senseless, make me forget. I convinced myself that as long as I was careful, we could keep this secret. But secrets have a way of unraveling, and I had a feeling this one was about to explode.